Sekeres and Price from the historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss Jewelers. Ben Moss is proudly Canadian-owned, operated with a history dating back more than a century. There are 5 locations here in BC: Willowbrook and Langley, Coquitlam Center. Committed to customer satisfaction. Check out the large selection of Canadian mine diamonds, lab-grown diamonds, and they have these diamonds with payment plans to suit your need. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, for the love of jewelry. As we bring in TSN insider Darren Dreger of the Rain Dregs Hockey Podcast. And I'm just glad that there was somebody back in Toronto at TSN this week, because it seemed like every other employee of the company was out here at the Grey Cup. How you doing, Dregs?
Yeah, I'm doing okay, thank you.
Did you doors and lock up at Scarborough there?
Did you open up the shop daily?
I chuckle about it, but what that speaks to is a level of importance at TSN and the brass at TSN and Bell, the importance they place on the Canadian Football League. And obviously the marquee game, which is probably the biggest game of the year on the TSN network. So they should be there en masse. And in this is also a celebration of a wonderful career of a good friend of ours in Paul Graham. So that's what made this extra special. And and then I look forward to the World Juniors, coming up obviously in December, early January. And one more time, we'll see PG on his farewell tour. And anybody who knows anything about the landscape of Canadian broadcasting would recognize the name of Paul Graham. So there was a lot going on this weekend for the decision makers at TSN.
Yeah, I saw John Shannon's post about how Paul's impact on Canadian television's Canadian sportscasting, and of course that Lalji guy got into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, so they were all here to celebrate Farhan as well. Brock Boeser, Dregs, what are you hearing on Brock?
Yeah, well, we know he's not with the club, and now you revisit that hit by Tanner Jeannot, and then you fast forward to what we saw on the weekend with Darnell Nurse going down, taken out by Ryan Reeves, and both end up in suspensions. I see that Kenzie Lalonde is tweeting that Chris Knobloch has acknowledged that Darnell Nurse is actually better than expected in that 5 to 10 day range. Brock Boeser is not with the team, but that's not to say that he isn't making improvements from that reckless hit by Jeannot. But the fact that he's not with the team tells you that he's still a ways away, but he is working out and he's trying to improve. But I do get the sense that this is going to be baby steps for Brock Boeser, and it's a difficult one to pinpoint on exactly what that timeline looks like.
And the Canucks have got better depth on the wings than they've had in recent years, and yet you just see how important he is in just setting up all of the pairs. And you wonder if that has something to do with JT Miller's, lack of spark here in the last couple of weeks. Now, he might be fighting something, but nobody's really willing to go down that road and admit that that's the issue for JT Miller. But Brock Boeser could be a key cog here for JT Miller.
Yeah, I get that sense. And Ray and I had that conversation on the podcast today, which we'll dump into the mix in an hour or so. But Brock Boeser is such a significant piece of that lineup. And you're right. It's not just taking a player of that magnitude out of the equation. It is the impact and the influence. Now, unless I heard incorrectly, I thought that Rick Tocchet had addressed the potential of JT Miller being dinged up post-game after Nashville, and it sure sounded like he was not willing to use any sort of injury or any sort of physical issue as an excuse for why JT Miller only played 2 shifts in the third, why he played less than 12 minutes. But aside from, look, we're almost 20 games in here, and there wouldn't be too many players who aren't feeling the first quarter of the regular season. So maybe there's something there. But Miller is also a player who prides himself on being able to play through that kind of stuff. And we've seen him play through worse, whatever it is, if there's anything bugging him. So it could be the fact that Boeser is not available to the Vancouver Canucks. But one thing that we know, it's a good thing they've got Elias Pettersson clicking a little bit here, right? His last 5 games, he's been pretty solid. But if the two of those guys, Pettersson and JT Miller, don't both contribute on a night in and night out basis, then the Vancouver Canucks clearly are at a pretty significant disadvantage when you're hurt like they are with Boeser on the sidelines.
Miller with Boeser is a 56% Corsi player this year. He is 45 without him. He's a 63% expected goals guy with Boeser. He's a 38% goals expected for without Boeser. Demko, what are you hearing on Thatcher?
Well, again, we know that he's a full participant now with the Vancouver Canucks, and that bodes well. I mean, his expected return is imminent. I would say sooner rather than later. Again, I'm dodging the specific timeline because I don't think that they have a specific date in mind, or at least one that they're willing to disclose at this point. The only indication, fellas, I was given this morning is that he looks good, and they'd like to see him get more reps to get fully up to NHL regular season game speed. But they like what they're seeing in practice. So it does feel like it's inside days now. So how many reps is a number of reps to get him up to full speed? That might be something that just has to be gauged practice by practice, day by day, skate by skate. You know, when Demko says, yeah, you know what, I'm ready. I feel like I'm good to go. And he passes the eye test from all involved in that decision making, then he'll be welcomed back into the mix. And man, isn't that going to feel like a mega trade for the Vancouver Canucks? I know we want to talk about defense and, you know, what's being speculated and what might be available out there, but you bring a piece like Thatcher Demko back into the equation, that's going to feel like a grand slam to Vancouver.
And we've often said this about, you know, promotion of a backup or even a 1B to a 1A position. In the short term, a lot of goalies can do it, and Kevin Lankinen has done it for the Vancouver Canucks, and he still hasn't played poorly.
No,
but there are cracks showing here, and you know Thatcher Demko can't come back a day too soon here. You know, I don't think the team's going to rush him back, but I think if Lankinen and Shilovs continue to take on some water here, you wonder if Demko is maybe going to shave off a day or two on the back end of this and just say, no, I'm ready to go here, because he wants to make sure the Canucks don't slide too far.
No, that's fair, Blake. And look, we know how hard he works. His work ethic, Thatcher Demko's work ethic, is well known, not just by the Vancouver Canucks, but that's part of his MO as an athlete. So he wants to get back into the crease ASAP. And I think to your point, what you could see, and you're not going to see pressure from Rick Tocchet or the coaching staff. They're going to do what's best, you know, for the long-term health of Thatcher Demko, because that's best for the Vancouver Canucks. But you're right. I think if we're talking days here, if we're talking a week or less, is shaving off a day really going to make a big difference? That's likely a question that Rick Tocchet is having already with, you know, the medical people, and maybe directly with Thatcher himself to say, hey, I'm not pressuring you, but obviously we're better with you in the net. So if you feel close, then, man, we'd love to have you as soon as you are capable of getting back in there.
And conversely, if Lankinen gets on a heater again, or Shilovs does,
you some of the heat off
for 3 or 4 games, then you allow him, 2 more extra days. You just never know, but we'll see how that ends up going. So you mentioned the defense. Have you heard how much the chains are being rattled by Canucks management with regards to some help there?
Well, I don't think that there's a strong eagerness. I think there's an interest. There wouldn't be many general managers out there. When you look at your blue line and you can envision what an upgrade might look like, those are the guys that are on the phone and making the calls and doing a lot of talking, and maybe less of the listening, because they're looking for, significant peace. But every time we get to this place, and again, it's around U.S. Thanksgiving and it's around that 20-game mark, I get the same response from the general managers when I ask, okay, well, is there an area that you'd like to improve? And they all say the same thing. Well, if there's an available top 4D, I'd sure like to add that top 4D. And if he happens to be a right shot, man, that'd be nice if we could add a top 4 right shot D. And then, of course, it's in jest, right? It's tongue in cheek, because they're like, come on, really? So I think what you have to do, Blake, if it's an area of concern and it goes beyond depth, if you're Patrick Allvin and the Vancouver Canucks, is start looking around the league at places where that player just doesn't seem to be the perfect fit, right? And I think we raised a little a few eyebrows when we tossed out the idea of Bo Byram as an example with the Buffalo Sabres. And I'm not suggesting that anything has been, rekindled there or has even been further investigated. But what I know is, and I was specific with Kevin Adams when I asked about Bo Byram, by the way, and he said, I can't envision trading him unless I'm getting something of substantial value in return that is going to help my team right now, right? So it feels like a long shot. But then in the same conversation, he said, but I'm willing to do something big. Well, big, if you're not moving out one of your top NHL players, which Adam says he's not interested in doing, big in my mind is a piece like Bo Byram, who has played real well for the Buffalo Sabres, but maybe doesn't love what he sees looking into the crystal ball and some of the other pieces that they have in that defensive core in Buffalo. But I don't get the sense that Patrick Allvin or anyone else is close on a deal of that magnitude.
Rutherford, of course, has been the earliest of early movers in the past. They are accruing cap space here, Dregs, even going so far as sending guys down for a day and recalling them, those incremental gains. We knew they were in on Gensel, or they wanted to be in on Gensel, but didn't have the cap space last year. Is this all working towards them positioning themselves to go all in March?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that'll be gauged again by how well the team plays, where they're at positioning in the standings, how comfortable they are with the group. I mean, we've talked about the areas of need. We just talked about defense, and they certainly want to address, whatever concerns they have there. We know that, they went into the season thinking that they'd like to upgrade up the middle of the ice, pinpointing a number 3 center. They've got time for what they've got developing there. But again, when you're talking about going all in, are you in a position where you lean on the inexperienced, or by all in, are you talking about an experienced centerman who has been there and done that when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs? And I just don't know that you're going to know any of that until we get into the second half of the season, unless there's a team that you look at as potentially being desperate. And there are some that might fit into that category. And, we look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. I talked about Buffalo. Nashville wins that game against the Vancouver Canucks, but that really doesn't change where the Nashville Predators are. So I think that there are lots of scenarios to look at. But when you're talking about going all in, man, we're in November here. And it's hard to envision what that looks like until you get into the new year.
Yeah, those sellers not quite ready to sell yet.
Not yet.
Calgary's still quiet. They owe it to their fans to just see how this goes here for another couple months. Is that it?
I think so, Blake. They're a step forward, 2 step back type of team. They kind of remind me a little bit of the Montreal Canadiens, but the Montreal Canadiens are there by design, and everybody knows what the Montreal Canadiens are. And in Calgary, I think they're still trying to figure it out. And I'm not saying that there's, kind of dissenting opinion on where they're at, but it does feel like they do have some interesting discussions internally among the management types as the direction that they're going. So I think right now in Calgary, it's status quo, and status quo isn't a bad thing as long as you salt in some wins to go along with those setbacks.
Well, it is heating up a little here. Saw insider trading last week, and Kevin Adams, go do something big, huh? With where nice. Buffalo's at in the standings, go do something big, Kevin Adams. You got all sorts of pieces there. I think that would be a really interesting trade.
Let's just follow that up. Like, if he's making a trade, like his forward depth isn't so bulletproof that he would trade from the forward depth, would he? Like, it would have to, it's one of the 4 big defensemen they've got, isn't it? Isn't that where their big trade happens?
Probably. But you look at their prospect pool in Buffalo, and it's pretty solid, right?
That's right. They got prospects coming, yes.
Yeah. That can cut both ways, and it's similar in Nashville. You can either use those pieces as trade bait. Then again, you look at contractually what's going on. I look at Peyton Krebs. They like him in Buffalo, but that's a contract situation that's going to develop as the season unfolds. Is Peyton interested in staying there? Is there a chance that Kevin Adams would consider moving a young piece like that? Again, he's careful in how he chooses the wording, right? It's always top young NHL players are not going to be put in play. Well, is it semantics here? Like, is Peyton Krebs considered to be a top young NHL player? He might be across the league, but it doesn't appear that he's played that way in Buffalo. So, yeah, I mean, Buffalo. And look, it's no secret Kevin Adams would be feeling some internal pressure. I mean, he's made a lot of bold decisions. He's gone through coaches. He's changed his roster a bunch of times. He probably feels that ownership is breathing down his neck a little bit. And I'm not suggesting that's going to change how he manages. He's an aggressive guy, but when you're kind of at the end of your own tenure there, and he probably feels that that's where he'll get to if things don't improve.
Oh, yeah, we saw it here with Benning, the pressure to make the playoffs when you've missed as many times.
Well, especially with him with the growing young core.
Well,
they should be winning more,
they
right?
Really should.
I agree.
They really should. Yep. Awesome stuff, Darren. Thank you for this. We'll catch up next week.